Hello everyone, and welcome to the Christian Forerunner Chess Club. This is Yukai Chow, and I will be your teacher today. Today we're going to talk about the 3 special rules of chess. So in a previous video, we talked about how the pieces move, how the king moves, how the queen moves, the knight, the rook, the bishop, and the majority of a chess game, it operates with these rules. But there are 3 special rules in chess, and so let's look at them. The first special rule of chess, which you probably will see the most often, is something called castling. Castling occurs when the king and the rook change positions. Let me show you how it works. So first of all, let's say you moved your knight and bishop out, and your king and your rook connects. Usually in chess, you can only move one piece at a time, right? If you move your knight here, again 1, 2, 3, L-shaped knight here, it's your opponent's move. And then they make one move, and then it's your move. But castling is the only move in chess that you can move 2 pieces at once. And how it works is that the king will jump 2 squares towards the rook, and the rook jumps over the king. And again, that's one move. It's called castling. Let's do that again. It could be a little complicated, right? First of all, none of the pieces are in between, right? So the king and the rook can see each other. And then the king will move 2 squares towards the rook. Remember, the rook king usually can only move 1 square in a move. But in this position, because it's castling, the king moves 2 squares towards the rook, and the rook jumps over the king. Now, you can also castle queenside. So let's say we move out all these pieces, right? And now this king can see this rook. It's the same rule. Now you would notice, because it's the queen side, the king and the rook are further away. You know, this is closer, this is further away. What you still do is, even though it's farther away, the king still just moves towards the rook 2 squares, and the rook jumps over the king next to it. So that's castling. And the benefits of castling is immense. Remember, we talked about in chess, the center is the most important part of the board, and there is a bridge which you need to control. And you also need to develop your pieces, right? You need to get your rooks out. Now at the beginning, rooks are in the corner. It's very, very hard for the rooks to come out and fight in the center, sorry. And you also want the king to not be in the center, because that's where the battle is. You want to protect the king. So castling allows you to, within one move, again, he can do king side or queen side, with one move the king to the corner, and then get his rook closer to the center and fight. Now keep in mind, there's a few other small things about castling. You cannot castle out of check. So let's say this rook comes here in check, right? When it's in check, you cannot castle out of check. You can't do this, hee, I'm going to run away. Oops. When you are in check, you have to block. And then the next move you can castle. Or, the other way too. You can castle on the queen side. The other thing is you can't castle through check. Now this is a little bit more complicated. Let's say this bishop, enemy bishop, is here, right? Well, obviously you can't castle into check, right? If you castle and then you're in check, that's illegal. You can't castle into check. That's pretty straightforward. But the more complicated one is you can't castle through check. Let's say this rook guards this line. The king can't jump 2 squares through the rook. He can't do that because the rook guards castling. So if the rook is here, check, he can't castle on this move. He can take the rook, but he can't castle. If the rook was here, he cannot castle. And if the rook was here, he cannot castle. So all these 3 squares need to be cleared up for the castling to occur. Also, you cannot castle if you've already moved your rook. So let's say you moved your rook from here to here, and then you move your rook back. You cannot castle on this side anymore because the rook's been moved. Let's say this rook hasn't been moved. You can still castle here, but if both rooks have been moved, then you cannot castle. Also, if you've moved your king, then you cannot castle either. Let's say you move your king over here, and even if you move back here, you cannot castle. So castle has a lot of little rules to it, but it's very useful. You want to castle early. Most grandmasters you see that play chess castle in every game almost, unless there's a special reason why not. So that's castling. Let's look at the second special rule of chess, which is pawn promotion. Remember that pawns can only move 1 square forward at a time. 1 square forward, maybe at the beginning they can go 2 squares, and they can capture diagonally. But pawns can never move backwards, right? So what happens when a pawn reaches the end, and it's like, oh no, I'm getting to the end and I can't go backwards. Now, is this pawn useless? No. The pawn on the last square can turn into something much more powerful. Most people change the pawn into a queen. It's called a promotion, right? The pawn can actually change to not just the queen. The pawn can actually change to any of these 4 pieces. The queen, the rook, the knight, and the bishop. Basically anything besides a pawn again, or a king. So obviously, because the queen is the most powerful piece, most people would promote to a queen. In rare cases, they would promote to the other 3 pieces, but we don't have to look at those right now. So that's why a lot of times when when two sides are playing, and one person is losing, but he can get his pawn to the end, then he gets a new queen and he starts to win, and that's very, very exciting. And also, that's also why in a chess set, sometimes you'll see 2 queens as your pieces, because sometimes in a game you'll actually have 2 queens, or you can get up to 9 queens. If all 8 of your pawns become queens and your original one, at the max you could get 9 queens. Obviously, usually you would win when you get your second queen. So 9 queens is never that necessary. All right, so let's look at the third special rule of chess, and this is a little complicated. This is called En Passant. En Passant is a rule where even a lot of people who've played chess for a while don't recognize. Let's talk about this pawn, right? This pawn is guarding these 2 squares, right? And if these pawns move 1 square up, you can take them, right? And if this pawn moves up, you can take them. But remember, in chess, the pawns at the original squares can move 2 squares if they want. So if this pawn moves 2 squares to here, crossing this little trap, then this pawn can still take like this. Take, boom, and this pawn is gone. Again, it's a little complicated. When the pawn crosses this little trap, like this, then he can take like that. It's called En Passant. Now keep in mind, it's only when someone pushes the pawn 2 squares up through the trap that this can happen. If this was the position and the person does that, then he can't En Passant because the pawn didn't go through two squares and crossing the trap, and so he can't do the ninja assassin move, right? Another thing about En Passant is that it has to be done immediately. So when he moves the 2 square up and he doesn't En Passant, let's say he does this and he does this. This pawn can no longer En Passant here because he already gave out. He didn't do it in the immediate next move. However, this pawn just moved up, right? So he can En Passant here if he wants to, because that was the last move. Now, if he didn't do either of that, and he just, let's say, did this, then, and let's say he does this, then he can no longer En Passant here anymore, because again, he gave up his chance if you don't do the next move. In this position, no one can En Passant because no one's crossing that square, right? He can push, but there's no En Passant here. So again, this is a slightly complicated. You rarely see this in a game of chess. Maybe 1 out of every 20 games you see an opportunity to En Passant. But just make sure when your opponent does that, don't be like, you're cheating, because it is a very valid rule in chess, and you can do it on a computer. Cool. So those are the 3 special rules of chess, and once you've learned all how the pieces move and those 3 special rules, you'll know every single rule in chess, and you'll be able to play like a master, hopefully soon. All right, this is Yukai Chow, and I look forward to playing you soon on the chessboard. Bye.